The Vegas Golden Knights have had a great start to the season, but they need to make sure to keep their foot on the pedal to maintain a top spot in the NHL playoffs. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in today's video. What Vegas needs to do to maintain this spot and how they need to game plan through the remainder of the season. So if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. But let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go and get right into things. At the start of the season, early on, the Vegas Golden Knights started off amazing. For a long portion of time, they were the 1 seed and or the 2 seed, and we're just had a really strong start to the season. Now, slowly as time's gone on, they've started to trickle down slowly, but they do currently sit at the 3rd seed after coming up with a big win, 5-4 versus the Predators earlier today in overtime. But many thought that this team could struggle through most of the year. Now, thankfully, they haven't, and they figure out a way to win. But as the year progresses and injuries begin to linger and go about, and energy from the beginning of the season starts to wear down, we could start to see this team slow down and potentially fall down the standings slowly. This is something that we saw last year, and that's something we want to make sure we stray away from. Now, of course, with Bruce Cassidy being a brand new coach for the Vegas Golden Knights, I don't really see that occurring. I think there's a lot more energy. And I do think Bruce Cassidy is a better coach than Pete DeBoer was last year. But we do want to make sure we don't see something similar happen again with the Vegas Golden Knights missing the playoffs for the first time in franchise history last year. So, let's talk about last year real quick. Just really short segment, because I think the situations currently sit very similar to one another. Now, last year we saw the Vegas Golden Knights team slowly start to crumble after the beginning of the new year. They sat at a 23-14-2 record at the exact moment that we're at right now, 39 games in. Vegas last year, 23 wins, currently 25 wins. And they had 48 points. Currently, the Vegas Golden Knights sit at 52. So nearly identical situations occurred for the Vegas Golden Knights last year as they have so far this year. But after having a 64% points percentage and a 58% win percentage, through that point, Vegas would start to come down the ranks slowly as time progressed. Now, of course, some big factors of this did include some injuries and some coaching, but we definitely start to see the wear and tear of the season progress and brought the Vegas Golden Knights falling down. Through the next 30 games, Vegas lost 16, below 50%, and after being nearly 60%, falling all the way below is definitely a big gap difference through, nearly half a season with 30 games, and of course 82 being the full length, nearly half the season. But with a 37-28-4 record at the time, the Vegas Golden Knights had 78 points and were still in the playoffs, and it looked very likely they would find a way to sneak in. But instead, we would see Vegas lose 7 of their final 12 games, including 3 overtime losses back to back in the shootout. Vegas would end up missing the playoffs by 3 points last year. They ended the year with a 52% win percentage, which dropped down by 6, and a 62% points percentage, which only dropped by 2%. Now, of course, currently the Vegas Golden Knights sit at 25-12-2 with 52 points on the year. Very similar situation to they sat at last year at the same number of games. So what do the Vegas Golden Knights need to do to maintain this stretch that they've put through and stay as a contender, a top level team in the West, and not see something like last year occur again? Now, as mentioned, currently sitting at the 3rd seed in the entire league, the best seed in the West. They're in a very good position for the playoffs. But of course, just approaching the halfway mark, a lot of things could change. We could see this team plummet. Now, we don't expect that, but that's what we could see. So, the first thing that I do want to mention here in hopefully, keeping up this pace and being a contender, which I think this team can be, is going to be maintaining a top-level duo in net, your goalies. Now, the Golden Knights have been very lucky this year with Logan Thompson and Adin Hill producing at a top level, especially with the loss of Robin Lehner early on in the year. Now, currently, the Vegas Golden Knights sit at 12th in goals against average as well as save percentage. So, in the top half, nearly top 10 in both major goalie statistical categories. that has been a key reason why this team's been going so good. Now, of course, your goalie stats aren't strictly because of the goalie. I think these two goalies, especially Logan Thompson, have been producing at a top level, but a lot of that does come with your defense doing very, very well for you, and I think that's happened so far. But Vegas Golden Knights needs to make sure that they can maintain this top-level goalie play through the year, especially once the playoffs do come closer. Because as we all know, the team that wins is normally the team that has a goalie that's on a hot streak at the time. Now, as long as Logan Thompson and Adin Hill, of course, can maintain this high level of play, 12th and 12th, I think Logan Thompson currently sits in the top 15 in both major goalie statistics. Now, that might have shifted a little bit after today's game where he allowed 4 and had 89 save percentage, but nonetheless, these guys have been great, and if they can maintain this, I do see that keeping Vegas enough in games where it will be close enough that the offense can do enough to win some more games. And that should be enough, to stay at this about 2-to-1 ratio if they can keep that process up. I have the hiccups. Now, speaking of scoring and offense, it's time that we start to see some production pick up from some of these lower lines. Now, we have seen it a little bit over time, and especially this game against the Predators today, but we need to see it occur more long term. As the year progresses, we're going to see some of those top lines either miss some time or just not be able to find a way to score, even with some top-level talent. I mean, great talent in Mark Stone, Jack Eichel. I mean, we've seen some big-time step-ups from Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, great top lines. There's going to be points where they still can't find a way to put the goal in net. So, Vegas needs to get some of these lower lines moving a little bit. Tough competition, lots of minutes, many, many things could affect your top line from scoring, from missing time. And your line 3 and 4 could be the difference between, a game here or there, but also your playoff luck and just an ability to win games that it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to. Now, line 3 and 4 definitely have been shuffled a lot through most of the year, and I think injuries have been a great part of that. We've seen William Karlsson primarily be a 3 or a 2 for this team, at least in lines setups. And for the most part, lately he's been a 2 because Jack Eichel's injury, but he's normally on that third line with the remainder of the misfits. Sometimes in the second line, depending on how things kind of rock out, with him and Riley Smith combining quite often. But outside of William Karlsson, Wild Bill, we haven't seen a whole lot of production from your lines 3 and 4. Nick Waugh and William Carrier are the highest scoring players for those positions. They each have 13 at the time points, 13 points. And although that's, pretty decent for what they do bring, about 1 point every 3 games, and these guys have found a way to pick it up as years have gone on, but that's not going to be enough to cut it, especially when you have struggles at your top line. So we're going to need, at some point, to see not only Nick Waugh, of course, and William Carrier hopefully get better, but they're the best so far at the third line and fourth line. But we're going to need to see some of these other players on those lines pick it up as well. Keegan Kolesar, Zach Whitecloud, who's been dealing with some injuries, although I feel like he's normally a little bit above that fourth line, third line. I mean, he's a top defenseman on this team, arguably. But you're going to need to see Keegan Kolesar, Braden McNabb, and some of these guys come up with some big-time goals. Paul Cotter as well. I mean, you need these guys, whether they get a lot of time, like playing or not, just start to produce a little bit more for your team. And we have seen some of these players on these lower lines, step up. Of course, as mentioned, William Karlsson, he kind of shifts lines. Sometimes he's on second line, sometimes he's on third line. It kind of depends on, injury status and things like that, but he's definitely seemingly started to get back on track to where he was in year 1. Currently, 39 games in the year. He is 7th most points on the team with 25. That's, pretty solid, and that's very good. I'm a huge fan of William Karlsson. I believe he's on my banner for my YouTube channel, but if we can start to see not only him continue his level of play that he's had, but also some of these other pieces pick it up on these lower lines, it's going to be a huge help for these top lines, take pressure off them, and, just kind of take some stress off them. But Vegas certainly needs to see some more players step up as the year goes on. Next topic is going to be the fact that Vegas should not be scared to rest players when it is necessary. Now, I'm not saying do what the NBA does where they just, randomly time manage people and say, oh, you're resting. LeBron, you're not going to play, or blah, blah, blah. I'm not a huge fan of that, but when it's necessary and when the advantage arises where you can do so, be willing to rest players. Hockey can be a brutal sport, from big hits against the board or just in open ice, fights, and just like the normal injuries that occur throughout the year. Lots of knee injuries, ankle injuries, shoulder injuries. I mean, there's so much that can occur in a hockey game, and you need to be willing to, let some of your players rest so that these injuries don't progress and become worse or become long-term issues. So, we've already seen quite a few players, especially important players, miss some time already this year. Jack Eichel has missed 12 games. Alex Pietrangelo has missed 10 games, and Shea Theodore has also missed 10 games. Those are some key players for this team, some, top two lines pretty consistently that have missed about a third of the season so far already. Now, with some important players already having missed some decent time, it's likely that as this season goes on, many teams, including the Vegas Golden Knights, will lose some more key pieces for long and short periods of time. And Vegas can't be afraid to rest some of these players. Let them sit an extra game after they get back from injury to make sure that they're 100%. Jack Eichel hasn't played for, a couple weeks now. He's expected to return, I think, on the 2nd, January 2nd, which would be the game on Monday. Maybe if he's not 100% and he feels 100% or it doesn't look 100%, rest him one extra game and wait till January 5th or whatever it may be. And that goes for all players. If something occurs and it seems like, oh, this is about a 1 to 2 week injury, just a few games here, if they don't look 100% or you just don't 100% need them, if it looks like an easier game, you can't take any game with a grain of salt, but you know what I mean, be willing to rest them an extra game or two. Take an extra day off of practice for the whole team after big wins. I mean, that's just a great way to be a coach and, support your team after a big win is to give them, a free day off of practice, especially with all the traveling in hockey. Or just be willing to let a few, veterans rest. That's a common thing in football, and I think it works very well after. Now, of course, with football being very different, you have a full week to prepare. Taking one rest day here or there maybe doesn't matter so much for each game, but let some of your vets rest every once in a while. Mark Stone, Riley Smith, all these guys that have been long-term in the league and long-term on the team, maybe let them rest a game or two here so they can, get fully refreshed. I think that only can bring good things. And when you get up early in a game, still be willing to put out your top lines to keep pressure and, keep the lead, but maybe put your third line and your fourth line out a little bit more than you normally would, especially as the year goes on. If you're already up 3 goals and you're entering the third period, you don't need to throw out your top 2 lines until, they get a goal in there. And I think Bruce Cassidy's done a pretty good job so far this year at kind of doing this with his players, but as the year goes on, it's definitely going to have to pick up a little bit where you're just managing your players, making sure they're healthy when playoff time comes, and also making sure they're healthy when games are necessary to win. And lastly, I think most important thing for Vegas to maintain what they've been doing is be prepared for some tough stretches of games, and especially coming very, very soon. I mean very soon as in the very next game. They're going to have a kind of tough stretch here. Vegas's games get a lot more difficult as the year's gone on. I wouldn't say they started off easy, but definitely not, extremely difficult. I'd say about average schedule through the first part of the year so far. But the next 3 games the Vegas Golden Knights are going to be playing are against the Colorado Avalanche, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the LA Kings. All of these guys are top 3 seeds in their division and all have been very, very good for the most part. Avalanche obviously started off a little rough, but have been very good. Vegas will also see the Oilers, Stars, Rangers, Capitals, and Devils all in January. 9 of their 12 games in January will be against current playoff teams. 9 of their next 12. 67% of their opponents that Vegas will be facing in January and February will be playoff teams. 67%. That is a huge amount of teams that are going to be high-level teams playing for a spot in the playoffs that Vegas will be seeing in the next 2 months here. And the last 2 months, of course, in March and April, 12 of 22, slightly above 50% of teams will be current playoff teams. A high percentage of teams that Vegas will be facing in these last 4 months will be playoff level teams. A very high percentage. And Vegas needs to be ready for that, because you need to be able to keep consistent and stay as close to that 2-to-1 ratio as you've been for most of the year. I think Vegas can definitely keep at that high level, and these are many of the reasons that they should focus on to stay at the high level. But what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think Vegas will be able to maintain this high level of play? And what do you think they need to do to stay a top contender in the West and a top seed in the entire league? What are your guys' thoughts on that? I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And as always, I hope it taught something today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Something really important to me. Affects me most today in a great way. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.